the Fishing Gurus podcast.
So welcome to the podcast again, you two lovely gentlemen. Great to have you on it, and I've been looking forward to doing this one. Before we proceed though, folks, we're going to have to put a bit of a spoiler out, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because, you've probably guessed it already, these guys are sat here because the latest Ringer versus Bennett is on the Tackle Guru TV YouTube. And if people listen to this podcast, Steve, what they're going to know?
They're going to know the result.
And if you don't, trust me, having been there and seen this match, you don't want to know the result from this podcast. Go to Tackle Guru TV, watch Ringer versus Bennett, the first episode at Weston Pools, before you listen any further. What you got to say about that, Bennett?
That's exactly right. Otherwise, it'll spoil it, won't it?
Yeah. But otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. So, boys, I want to touch on last year's antics to start with. When I first put it to you both in that WhatsApp message, we're going to do a Ringer versus Bennett chapter for our Fishing Gurus, our headline flagship filming project. What were your initial thoughts, Steve?
To be honest, I thought, unless I'm going to get a massive home advantage, I'm right up against it. It's not a style. If we were going commercials, I was thinking straight away, I'm up against the best in the country, best in the world. What chance have I got? And the other thing is, it's all going to be on film, so there's no place to hide. And if you get absolutely battered, it's like everyone's going to be able to watch it, and then it's going to be there forever for people to see it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's not a no-win situation, but it's not a situation that I was relishing.
What about you, Bagger? What did you think when you first saw that message? I've got an idea, lads. You're going to take on Ringer head to head.
Yeah, it's one of them things, isn't it, where you can't really win. Like Steve said, you're putting your neck on the chopping line for no reward, really, other than, to help the public as such. You know what I mean? There's no, all right, the winner gets £1,000 or this or that. Do you know what I mean? You think, right, so it's like, there's no, if you got beat in a big money final or whatever, you're there, the reward's there. So yeah, it's hard to.
We've kind of got you by the nuts though, haven't we? Because obviously consultants, we have to get you doing some media and stuff. So
people want to see it, don't they?
Yeah,
it's one of them things, and it's not something you relish, like Steve said, but it is a little bit exciting.
Was there anything in either of you that were like, I'd quite like to take him on. I'd quite like to pitch myself. Or did you ever think that, Steve?
No, to be honest. I didn't see any need to do it at all. Obviously, originally as well, you said it was going to be a grander match.
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for the first two payments.
Well, Adam Rooney sat in that other room back there, so go and speak to him about it.
So no, I mean, I knew how good Andy was, and I still know how good he is. So like, why would I want to fish against him like in a live match on telly where everyone can see it? It's like, it is that no-win situation, and there was no part of me that thought, tell you what, I'd like to challenge myself against Andy.
Tell you what, Toad, we've made them do something neither of them want to do, haven't we? Fishing against each other. Yeah.
Do you know what it was for me, that I'm not a massive angler, but to watch you two go at it, it was like, I think I said to Matt, this is like the Fury Wilder of fishing, really, isn't it?
It is exactly that. And last year, obviously, for those that don't want to hear this, go and have a look. It's all on YouTube. But it was a 2-0 victory to Steve. Bagger, how were that perceived for you? You're coming into this year 2-0 down. What did you feel? How did you feel about that?
Well, obviously, the first one at Partridge is only 7 ounce separated.
7 ounce.
Steve had 3 ways, so I probably beat him really. But,
I didn't shake any roach off either.
But yeah, like, it's so close, and it's like people think, oh, Andy's own venue, but I never actually fished that lake. I knew it had carp in, do you know what I mean? But it's not sort of like the covies that we fish regular. So obviously you want to win. I go there, I'm associated with Partridge quite a lot because I'm there more than anywhere. So it would have been nice to win that one. And then Makins, obviously the second round. Steve grew up, fished there a lot more than I have. He's got the knowledge on it. But it's carp fishing at the end of the day. Whoever's on the best peg, not just whoever's on the best peg, because that's sort of discrediting Steve, but like, normally when you get to a certain level, the better peg will outshine it or whatever. And with Steve's knowledge, I had first choice at Makins. I picked what I thought was the better peg. But Steve just always seemed to set off really quick. Do you know what I mean? Got a good start on both of them, so it was a bit annoying because it's like...
Now you mentioned it,
Yeah.
there is a bit of a common theme with this man, and he does get off to a good start a hell of a lot, and we'll hear a bit more about it. I'm going to ask him about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But, like, to you, Steve, how was it perceived from your point of view, beating Bagger both times last year in last year's series?
I think from a personal level, from my own sort of like fishing, it was nice because I used to fish commercials like 3-4 times a week. My name was always made fishing for carp, and I did a lot of F1 fishing at Tunnel Barn. So it was nice to sort of go back and prove I could still do it. And I think some people had almost like, oh, Steve Ringerino goes feeder fishing. He can't do this anymore, can't do that. So it was nice to go back. Obviously, both matches were ridiculously tight, and I got the little bit of luck, obviously, in both and got over the line. But I'd argue I put, particularly the Makings one, I put more work into it probably than Andy did. You know what I mean? But that's me. In my own head, I have to prepare a lot more for anything. If I've got something like a live match on telly, to me is massive. So I put a lot more work in. I can't go into something like half-hearted thinking, I'll see what happens on the day.
Interesting. What I'd like to know is, obviously, all that pressure, all that effort, all that publicity and buzz around them first 2 matches. How did you feel when I messaged you again saying, right, we're going to continue this battle and do another series of Fishing Gurus with Ringer versus Bennett again? And the first one, I'll pitch this to you first, Andy, is you're going to Weston Pools on the clay pit to fish against each other. How did you feel when you got that message through?
I used to fish Western quite a bit, but I wasn't like, it's not really, because it was sort of like, right, your home pick, Andy, is Western, Steve's home pick up is wherever. So you sort of like, the way it's run, you're sort of like one venue for me, one venue for Steve, but, you know, like Partridge and Makings, Steve were more Makings, I were more Partridge. I didn't feel like Western was a home advantage. I'd been there a bit, but I'd only fished clay pit probably twice. So I was like, I don't know. I know there's a lot of carp in there. It weren't just going to be an out-and-out F1 match. Bit of both had come into it. But I felt like it'd be a fishing match. I felt like it'd be good. There'd be a lot of fish caught. Yes.
Did you feel like it were a good chance to beat him?
Yeah, if it fished how I thought it would fish. But I knew Steve would always have the capability of beating me easy as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I felt like, even at Makings, which is Steve's home venue, the methods are pretty similar for carp fishing. So even there, I still felt like I had a chance to beat him. And if it had been regular and maybe practiced, you're talking 2 or 3, 4 fish. Like, you can never, there's not been any match where I felt like, you know, the first 2, for example, hand on heart, I had a chance to win both. I got my tactics right, but Steve got it right both times in that first hour, which was crucial. And that's, like I said, probably down to putting the time and effort in. He's been rewarded for it. Western, you know, I just thought there's going to be loads of fish to be caught, but I don't know. I don't know the clay pit as well.
It's not as much of a home venue as I think a lot of people think it is to you, Andy. But for you, Steve, obviously, totally foreign venue. And I know the conversations and the text messages and the banter we had. Dead honest, what did you think when I said you're gonna Western, you're gonna clay pit?
Straight away to you, that's perfect for me. No, I was not happy.
The teddies flying out at prom everywhere.
Not teddies, but I was. I voiced my opinion, and that obviously, I had no chance against Andy in an F1 race, which I still believe I didn't. That's my honest. I said that all the way through. Yeah. Obviously, the Western film. If I had to fish shallow against Andy, he wins, because I'm not saying I can't do it, but I don't do it regular enough, and one day's practice wouldn't have been enough to get anywhere near his level. No. So obviously, I wasn't happy that we were going to Western, but you did say, look, it'll be all right. You know, there's enough carp in there. You know, I mean, there's something else you can do, etc. But I did ring a few people up, and like all of them were like, "You got no chance." So that didn't really improve my mood.
Who did you ring out of curiosity?
Obviously, first of all, I tried to get Matty Dawes, but he's like Andy's best mate, apparently, and wouldn't tell me a thing other than obviously I can't do this to Andy.
Is that what he said?
Pretty much.
Fair play to Matt.
I spoke to Jamie Hughes. Jamie was more open, but I said to him, "Would you want to fish against Andy at Clay Pit?" He's like, "Why would anyone want to do that?" And then I spoke to a couple of other people who'd filmed there in the past, and Joe Carras, to be fair, did say, "Look, there are a lot of carp," but I said, "Can I beat Andy fishing for carp?" He's like, "I don't think so. There's too many F1s." So I did. After I spoke to a few people, and you weren't going to budge on the venue choice, I sort of got my head round it, but there was no way I was going to go up there blind.
Right. And that's obviously why you went and had a practice, which I'll ask you a little bit about shortly. In terms of like these shoots, the people that are listening, I just want to put them into perspective of what it's actually like. So, Bagger, what's the routine like for a Fishing Gurus Ringer versus Bennett shoot? How serious is it in terms of, cameras, filming, the setup, the match itself?
Well, when we did the first one at Partridge, I didn't think it would be that serious, to be fair. Until I seen all the kit that Steve set up. And then I was like, all right, I've got 2 top kits and a feeder and a waggler. But that's one thing I learnt about him, which we'll talk about in a bit, like his intensity and how he is, and he's different to me, do you know what I mean? But I just thought it'd be a day's filming, but actually it's probably 5. You do a good job of getting all the footage with allowing us to fish. I would say 95 to 95% of it is fishing, 5-10% of it while you're fishing is filming. Is that a good?
An odd interview.
We do get left to fish. It's not set up. It's not like, right, Andy, you catch the fish, Steve. It's the genuine matches, which people would probably find hard to believe after the first one. It's like, 7 ounces separated. They probably think like, nah, they've set that up.
I had someone from a tackle company, I'm not going to mention the name, someone from another tackle company went, great job, loved the film, like what you did with the weights. And I went, what do you mean? And he went, well, it's obviously you made it really close. And I was like, no, that's...
genuine.
Yeah. They didn't... And that's a well-known person from a tackle company. And I still think maybe that particular person don't believe us, but...
No, that's what it is. It's that they're the weights, and that's what it was. It was genuinely that close. And... yeah, like, we get to fish, obviously little things, but you're really good with like staying back with the cameras and stuff. So, it didn't really affect us at Partridge and stuff, but like Steve had a few in the margins at Makins, but you're cautious of it, you let us get on with it. So it is serious, do you know what I mean? Like, especially the second lot that we did this year, I took it a little bit more serious. You knew what's involved, you knew what the filming would be then. But yeah, they're good to film. I do enjoy them.
Good. I want to get right into Weston now, and obviously the match in particular. Give us a little bit of background about how you both prepared for the match. So, Steve, how did you get prepped for taking Bennett on at Weston, and what were you doing, the night before the match, the days leading up to it? Tell us what happened then.
Obviously, once I knew we had to go to Weston, I arranged to go and have a practice. I think it was about 2 days before, maybe 3 days before the match. In my head, I spoke to obviously the people I've mentioned. They were like, right, shallow and there's carp short. So it was pretty simple. There wasn't going to be any rod and line fishing. So I went for a practice. I was told like throw casters in on a top kit, etc. And I actually fished Andy's peg when I practiced.
I told you both what pegs we were fishing. Yeah.
So I knew which 2 pegs we were going to fish. I fished Andy's because it was a nice big platform, sort of back end of the lake. And like I threw casters in, and straight away to me it just didn't seem right. So then I switched it to hard pellets, and the bottom Clay Pit plums up really horrible, and it's really silty as well. It's a really old lake surrounded by trees. So when I practiced, I switched it to hard pellets. That wasn't great. Kept foul looking, odd fish. And then I looked at the water and I just thought, it's really clear. It looks like a corn venue to me. Like that's going back years and years ago at Makins, where like I used to do loads of corn fishing. So I opened some corn, got some hemp out, another bait that's a bit old school, people don't use anymore. And I thought hemp will help pin them on the bottom. Corn's nice and visible. Both baits create a bit of noise. And I messed around with it. And it was good when I practiced. But like when I was fishing on the silt, you had to keep moving. So like I'd feed a bit of bait, catch 2, and I'd be like, this is it. And then the next one's fouled, and then the swim would start bubbling up. So I'd have to start a new swim like 2 foot to the left. And after about 3 moves, I thought the bait's right, but where I'm fishing's not. So I basically moved my box to the right of the platform, and then fished against the platform, because where Andy fished, it was a big double platform. And the bottom was very hard. I put a bank stick in and like tapped it around, and I found like a really hard area to the left, and I fished there and fed on that, and it was like throwing a light switch.
Wow.
I stopped foul looking any fish. There was no more bubbling, and it was brilliant. And I actually caught some much bigger fish in practice than what fed in the match. So I learned low. If I hadn't have practiced, he'd have wiped the floor with me. You know, and the other thing I learned in practice was I needed more than one day to catch F1 shallow. I did it for about 2 hours in practice. I knew I wasn't up to speed compared to what I expected him to be at. So I basically spent like the next 4 hours working out how to catch carp, because that was my best chance of doing it.
Amazing. And what about yourself, Bagger? What were your sort of prep and mindset before the match?
Well, obviously, I've got mates who fish there a bit more regular, like Matty and Christian and stuff like that. And everyone just sort of said, maggots or casters on a top kit. So there, they don't really throw live maggots. It's more dead maggots, which is a bit alien to me, fishing dead maggots in 6 foot, but that's what they do.
Sink so slow.
I know, but it's like, that's what they catch on, dead maggots on a top kit.
Right.
And it's like 6 foot where they normally fish it, but the best pegs for it are probably the best pegs for plumbing up and the bottom's right. You know, it's probably a harder bottom. Casters can be good. And Matty Dawes was actually filming the day before we went down. So as I got down there at the night match, obviously England was on, was going to go and watch the football. I went and had half an hour on his gear. I said, leave your gear set up, I'll just have a quick half an hour. And in half an hour I had like 40, 50 pound throwing casters in with a piece of worm on. Perfect, I'll do that tomorrow. But you got to remember, like, so that's one method, caster shallow. So to me, it's like a few hard pellets, some casters, and it was just wrong. It was wrong on the day. I caught perch, and I knew after 10 minutes it was wrong, because it was like perch. There's just way too many perch there, and Steve got it bang on. And I think it's different as well when you pleasure fishing to when the lake's pressured. I don't associate emp and corn with a bait that's gonna, when it's hard, I don't associate it with a bait that's gonna keep drawing lots of fish in, whereas maggots and casters, it might be a little bit different. They get their heads down, they'll eat them, and it's not going to fill them up as much. But when you're fishing for big weights, I think Steve got the method bang on. But I think the most important thing is where he chose to fish. He fished, even when he practiced my peg, he told me afterwards, he fished to the left, right next to the pallet. The reason I didn't fish there, one, I didn't even plumb it, but afterwards it made perfect sense. I'm fishing towards all the space, but I'm probably going away from the carp as well, because they're probably more to your right. But where he fished, I thought I'll just get ragged to death. I remember watching him plumb up in between the two little pallets and chuckling, thinking he's going to get ragged to death, because they fight like mad.
Take him round the platform.
Yeah, he'll look one, it'll go straight on the platform. And I don't think one did any.
I never had one go.
Never had one. And I said to Matty Dawes afterwards, like, he's not even lost a fish down there. And another thing, I got my elastic wrong. And that's where practicing does help massively, because I'd never dreamed of fishing right next to the pallet. One, the bottom was harder, which I didn't know because I don't know the venue as such. But you'd been round, hadn't you?
I went round. I did both pegs with a bank stick.
Dinking it in.
Yeah, and obviously, like the peg I ended up fishing in the match, that was amazing. Like on the empty platform to the right, it was like ching, 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 ching.
Wow.
But the only place I could find it on Andy's was to position if I'd have drawn Andy's peg, I'd have sat far right and then fished like a top kit and a short 3 against the platform, and there was a nice area there. But I think I benefited obviously from the day's practice, and also I was told a load of stuff, but I had no preconceived. Obviously, Andy didn't have the opportunity maybe to practice, but I had no preconceived ideas.
Right.
So like, because Matty wouldn't tell me anything, and I went there with an open mind, and I looked at it from my own history of fishing and just thought that colour's perfect for corn. And it might never be perfect again. And like we've been talking about it before we started, and people have tried it since, and it's never really worked. I personally though would love to go back and try it myself
in a match,
because I can't believe it doesn't work. But I might be after 2 hours be like, I've got this big time wrong.
How did football go down, Andy? Night before.
We won, didn't we? I can't remember.
Did we win?
We had a few
Toby, I
beers.
reckon I've supplied you.
Yeah,
with
we won
that
because we was cheering and stuff, weren't we? We won.
Judging by the scenes in this video,
So
I
this,
think you...
this folks,
Oh,
this is Weston Pools Clubhouse about 9 o'clock the night before Ringer versus Bennett. Is it going to play?
What have you got here?
Saw you drop your phone there.
All I can hear is Rimmer cheering.
Oh, it was a Denmark game, wasn't it? I remember now.
Some bad language on there as well.
Yeah. Is there no footage of Bennett cheering?
We're on the table, was that?
I'm sure there is a good.
Yeah, there's a real good bit where it really shows. Here we are.
Waiting for the penalty, aren't we?
Right, so this, folks, is Bennett 10 hours before the match. 10 hours before taking on Steve Ringer.
Pizza and a pint.
There's our cameraman, director Joe, Matt Ford, Rimmer. Oh God! If you're listening in your car, folks, you've got to go back and watch that. And the idiot at the end with his top off, Rimmer, he's actually our drone pilot and main cameraman. He's actually really good at what he does.
He's going to go viral after that now, isn't he?
Probably will, won't he? Yeah, Guru's professional cameraman. Obviously, I know you took it steady that night. I think you only had about 4 pints, didn't you?
Yeah.
Andy, can I ask a question? Why, from what I watched of the Weston Pools one, the practice seemed quite significant in what was a close match. Why didn't you go down for a practice?
I was busy with coaching and stuff leading up to it, and to be honest, the lads who I speak to, like Kristin and Matty, they win a lot of the matches there. So I just thought, and they know what to do, and they wouldn't lie to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, genuinely, that's what they do in the matches. So I just felt like I did it. I had 40 minutes on Matty's gear just to work out how many casters to throw in. My shallow fishing, I didn't really need to practice that, so that was one line covered. And then my ground bait in my edge, like, don't matter what venue you go to, that's covered. I know how to fish for carp in shallow water.
Yeah, of course.
The only thing that was unsure of is that deep water line. But where I got it wrong is I fished sort of 5 or 6 foot in front of me with casters and maggots like they normally do. And I fished in about 16 inches in the edge with ground bait. I should have been fishing somewhere in between that. But if I'd have gone and practiced, I might have just got one a chuck in the edge all day and probably done the same anyway. So
you almost feel like practicing were going to be pointless.
Yeah,
for you, Andy.
yeah, bit pointless. I have fished the lake once before when we did a video there, didn't we, for one of the magazines, and I caught exactly the same caster shallow ground bait in the edge. Steve's gone there and done something that's pretty alien. Nobody fishes like that. He's gone there, like I said, with no preconceived idea of what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And that's been the difference. So practice to him has been perfect. He's gone there and thought, this caster ain't right, I'm going to do something myself. I wouldn't have, even if I'd have gone and practiced, I wouldn't have gone there with Emp and Corn because I've not done tons of that style of fishing. When someone's really confident in something like Steve is and he's caught thousands and thousands and won tons of matches on it, he's got that method in his head. Until you've seen it and done something, you know, I wouldn't have gone there and practiced Emp and Corn anyway. So I wouldn't have learnt nothing if I went to practice, I don't think.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm going to skip forward a bit to like the start of the match now, gang. And obviously that were a real key moment. But Steve, we've talked a lot about this hemp and corn approach that you learnt in practice and how good it were. And that got you off to a really, really good start. How important was that to you in the match against Bennett on clay pit?
Going back to when I practiced, I do think as well I had an advantage after. I knew I couldn't beat Andy fishing shallow, so like Andy not practicing, I'd imagine if I was Andy, I'd have been thinking, I know clay pit, there's X amount of F1s to be caught shallow. That's my banker anyway. So I wouldn't blame Andy for not practicing, because it was simplified for me, because I tried to catch F1 shallow, and I could catch some, but I knew I couldn't do it as well. So I had to find another way of fishing, which suited me as it happened. But going back to the start, my plan was to start on a top kit, but start on the silt so I could let my platform line settle, because I knew the silt would blow up, and that's exactly what happened. But I got that fast start, and I think against someone like Andy, if I'd have gone massively behind, particularly if he was catching F1 shallow, he'd have never had to come off it, and then it just would have been a procession. I can't catch him back up. So getting a fast start, I don't know, maybe getting 30, 40 pound ahead, just built me that nice buffer, which when I look back, having watched it, yes, a couple of times I think he got me right back again, but because I had that little buffer, I could afford a bad little half hour. And I was always going to have a strong finish. So I always felt if I could go into the last hour ahead, I had a really good chance of maintaining that, because of the amount of carp that it was apparent were in clay pit.
Got you. I think we've got some footage, Tobe. I've got it noted down here as 4:30 to 5:50 Ringer's plan.
Yeah.
Be just interesting to pop that on. This is from the actual film at Weston Pools on the clay pit, folks. And this is where, I think it's where Dean were talking to Steve about his plan before the start, so you can see and hear exactly what Steve had to say about it beforehand.
The only reason I really chose this peg, the way I look at it, Andy's phenomenal at what he does.
Yeah.
I can't beat Andy copying him.
Right.
And my attitude is, there's a lot of big F1s. If he fishes shallow back to back, I can fish shallow back to back, and I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
But he's better. He does it all the time.
Right.
So I can't beat him copying him.
So that leads me into my second question. What is your plan? What's your plan A? What's your plan B? And also, second question, he's in your eye line. How much are you going to be watching him?
If I watch him, my head will disintegrate, literally disintegrate, because he's so good at what he does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just don't do. There's a lot of big F1s, that's Andy's forte.
So he's going to hit the, if he fishes that way and you both fish that way, you think he's going to hit the ground running and get into a rhythm quicker, and you're just not going to be able to keep up pace?
Yes, basically, because he does it 3-4 days a week, and I go feeder fishing. Like Tuesday was the first time I've been pole fishing in sort of 6 months.
And no point fishing in this place because it's 45, 50 foot
It's,
deep.
yeah, it's really deep out. The way I look at it, if Andy fishes shallow and I fish shallow, let's say hypothetical weights, he catches 180, I catch 140.
Right.
So he wins because he's a little bit smoother, a little bit faster. But if he fishes shallow and catches 180 and then I fish for carp, I do something a little bit different. I think there's a lot of carp to be caught very short.
So you are planning to do something a little bit different?
I don't want to fish shallow. If I have to fish shallow, half an hour in, I'm fishing shallow.
Well, he can't hear us, so what's your go-to? How are you going to start
My plan
this?
is I need to plumb it up to find out. The bottom on this lake is horrendous.
Right.
It's like potholes all over the place.
Right.
I want to find a nice flattish spot, sort of 5.5 foot deep on a top kit.
Right.
Because it's deep, the fish are going to come really, really close.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking top kit, hemp and corn. Basically, keep it nice and tight. I'm going to pot everything because when I came in the week, if you throw any bait, they come at all different levels.
Right. Yeah.
And you start foul looking, etc. Pot everything. Be a little bit more patient.
Yeah.
So if Andy fishes shallow, he's going to catch more in numbers than me. But what I'm hoping is I'll get some big F1s on the deck, but I'll get some 5, 6, 7, 8 pound carp as well. Nice. That's the plan.
Well,
if everything goes to plan, I'll be on a top kit and 1, and you won't see any more pole.
And plan B is literally just fight fire with fire.
Interesting, very interesting. You sounded super confident after your practice, mate, there. You really did. And Bagger, watching that back and hearing Steve's thoughts about the start of the match, I'd like to know, how did you feel when you've started how you've started and maybe it's not been quite as good and Ringer's in your eye line and he started really well? Did that put you off? Were you worried? Did the falling behind at the start of that match, how did that affect you, or did you see it as a bad thing?
I didn't. I thought I'd go in and catch shallow quite quick, to be honest. So I weren't overly worried. But when I went shallow and I didn't catch, a few silvers, which is not what I was expecting, then I was a little bit more worried because I started on casters, and I should have started on hard pellet, but casters was so good the day before that I just thought, this will be brilliant. I'll just throw some casters in, I'll just catch one every chuck sort of thing. And it just wasn't like that. It was just perch. And I knew after 10 minutes I'd messed up. So I very quickly switched after about 10 minutes to hard pellet. I should have gone the opposite. I should have started on hard pellet, got me a little quick run, and then switched to casters and tried to build it up. So, yeah, it's one of them
Did you-
situations.
did
I
you
felt
think-
like I made a mistake. A little bit like I did at Makins in the second one. I started short because that's what I do on most of my fishing. I caught 1 or 2 fish, but Steve caught 4 or 5 shallow. And I'd actually been told by Griff to start long pole shallow. But it's not something I really do. I feel like you're not in control as much as starting short. But that sort of venue, Steve started shallow. He knew, and that was the difference come the end of the match. And that early start, I was thinking, I hope this 20-30 pound ain't going to cost me. Because if I'd have started on hard pellets, I might have caught 5 or 6 fish instead of 1. But yeah,
In your own head, though, what I want to get to the bottom of, like, during the match, during that very start of it, did you panic at any point? Did in your head you think, that's it, he's ahead, he's got me here already?
No, I don't like, because 5 hours you can catch like so quick. And I was quite confident that they'd come in that shallow water. I thought I'd probably catch a carp every single chuck in the last 2 hours down the edge. Because I've seen what it's like. When they come in there, they can come in 5s and 6s. And they just stay there. So I felt like ground bait in the edge would be brilliant. But obviously I didn't take into account like cameras and stuff. And Steve said it straight away after the match. Like, I had a fish to me left away from the cameras. I didn't even think of that. I just thought, right hand edge, like, obviously you've got to come to me. You're going to be walking past it all the time. I tried to put a trolley there to give it a bit of cover, but it's the noise of moving. And when you're trying to catch them in really shallow water, like, these mistakes. So like when you look back, you think, I could have done this different, could have done that different. That's the beauty of fishing, isn't it?
Could have nicked another 20,
could have
30 pound.
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely
Interesting.
started wrong, definitely.
Moving into that sort of second third of the match, Steve, obviously you didn't do a lot different. That short and edge, not really an edge, but next to the platform to your right, you just sort of maintained and stayed on that. Why was that? No reason to come off it?
Because it was vital to me to get that fast start. Got it. Got the little buffer. The match actually panned out exactly as when I practiced. When I practiced, it amazed me how long it took the F1s to come shallow. I expected them to be climbing up the pole within like 10 minutes. And when I practiced, it was like 2 hours before I started seeing shapes and I felt there was enough there to start catching them. So I knew at some point Andy was going to get that amazing chance to put a massive weight together. But if I was far enough ahead, then I could hopefully keep that buffer. I probably needed to catch 1 fish to Andy's 2 or 3 if I could catch the right fish. But going back to my own match, all I did was the top kit line blew up, so I moved to the pallet, which was only a top kit and a short 3, so it wasn't much further away.
You literally swung round to your right hand side, didn't you?
Yeah, I was fishing slightly right anyway, and then I think I actually tried to the left. That wasn't right. Went back to the right. As Andy said, in my head, I was thinking the cameras were working between us. So if I fished to the right, which is another reason why I chose that swim, because I had the platform, and then to the right, obviously there was less disturbance. But most importantly for me was the bottom there. The only thing I got slightly wrong in practice, potting was miles better when I practiced, but in the match, throwing was 100% better. Not necessarily throwing over the float, because if you threw over the float, you tended to foul hook, or you'd get silly indications. But like throwing for the noise, I think just helped me pull more fish. So I'd like hook one, pick up a handful of hemp and corn, throw it in, and then once I netted it, throw another handful in, and then you could literally go in and there'd be one weight in. And it was very sort of what I call rhythm fishing.
Got you.
And I had a couple of slow spells where I went shallow, but I never felt like I was running out of fish on the inside. So as long as Andy didn't empty it down the edge, and I did learn I felt I'd learned something. When I practiced, I fished Andy's peg, as I've said. To the left, I proper cleared it out and got into like 12, 14 inches of water, which to me looked, I was like, I'm going to empty it there. And then where Andy fished, there was a load of grass and stuff in the water. So I plumbed to the edge of the grass, which it was in like 2.5 foot. And I emptied it on the edge of the grass and caught nothing in shallow water. I couldn't get them to settle.
Interesting.
I didn't feed ground bait like Andy did, so I didn't know what was going to happen then. But everything I fed, they wouldn't settle. So basically, when I saw Andy get there and pull all the grass out, I was really happy. Yeah, I was, because if it stayed the same, I thought he's going to struggle to settle them there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they even sat on my own, I couldn't get them to settle there. But I know in the past, we've been talking again, and Andy's emptied it in that depth. So maybe it was just that particular time they weren't comfortable in shallow water, the disturbance. But I felt they wanted cover, which is probably why the platforms were good. I knew my edge was really solid, and it was 3.5 foot deep. So I felt they'd be more confident there, and that's how it panned out.
We've got a nice clip, Tobe, that'd be probably worth showing. It's only a short one, just over a minute, of the actual start of the match. And before, it'd be good for everyone who's listening or watching at home just to see a little montage of the guys in action actually kicking off, because everything we've just spoke about, it's all about that first little bit of the match and the importance of it to each of them. So let's have a little watch of that, and then we'll move on to the middle bits.
Well, ladies and gents, it's the time we've all been waiting for. Bennett, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Steve, are you ready?
Born ready.
5 hours, 2 of the best in the business. All in!
The lake looks quite coloured there. It's actually gin clear, isn't it? Doesn't it look dead coloured?
Green, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I can see it's clear
See it
now.
there, yeah.
Here's Bennett. Steve, that's your top kit line there, yeah?
Yeah, slightly to the right. Bennett off to a flyer.
2 ounce perch.
I love it there. He goes, I'm on perch, me. I'm after perch. It's not what you want to see, is it?
We'll do on that peg.
Wicked start, boys. Really, really exciting. Now, I want to move on to that middle part of the match. And for me, Bagger, after that steadier start you had, we were all sort of sat back watching. Even the camera guys, Dino and everyone was saying, can't wait for Andy to go shallow. We were all looking forward to watching you fish shallow on clay pit. And when you had that first go, you caught a few silverfish on it. It weren't quite right. You came back off it. But then the second time you went out onto it, and it's sort of half an hour into the film that you'll see it, it's a key decision you made, in my opinion. You sort of committed to going shallow. How did you go about doing that? What were you thinking behind it, and how did that lead your match through?
Obviously, once I started settling in and catching a few shallow, then you're like, right, I'm catching now. Early doors, when I first went on it, I was like, oh, they're not here yet, because I knew I'd messed my short line up, and they weren't in the edge, and I just thought there ain't many fish short here, and I was just waiting for that shallow line to kick in, and hopefully my edge, I could maybe pick a few better fish off as it went along. But once I started getting into a rhythm, then it started to feel like I was getting into the match, then growing into the match, if you like.
And you caught really ridiculously well. And afterwards, obviously, like, we stay the second day and talk to you in depth about what you did. But just for the people listening, like, what were the key to catching shallow on clay pit from a technical fishing point of view? Because you literally, Steve got ahead, you fell behind, I was thinking this is all over, then you went shallow, and I thought he's coming back, and Steve tried not to look at you, even he was turning to his left watching. You literally emptied it for 45 minutes, an hour before you even looked at doing anything else. What were the technical key to being good at that?
Any shallow fishing is just about like finding where the fish are intercepting your bait. So obviously clay pit's a really good example, because you can actually see what the fish are doing. So like they sit quite deep, and then excuse me, they rise up for your bait, and then they'll drop down. So obviously picking the right bait's important. Casters, pellets, maggots is probably, too many nuisance fish. Pellets probably sink a little bit quicker. Casters always seems to be the best bait on there. So obviously feeding regular, making sure you got plenty of bait so you can hold the shoals of fish as well, because they are big shoals when they come in. But the key thing is obviously just finding where they're intercepting it, and then trying to make your hook bait as natural as possible. Like, one thing we did agree on, which I've got to mention, we agreed on no jiggers. And looking back after the match, I was like, Ringadee, what a fish shallow has set me up there. yeah, no jiggers, Andy, that's great. And obviously, like, with a jigger, you're not just fixed at one depth. So if you don't get a bite, you can go down. And when it's hard at the start of the match, and when it's really good at the end, a jigger's a good thing. They catch quite a lot of fish on the jigger on clay pit. Having a fixed rig, like you put your rig in, if your rig's say 12 inches deep, and that particular feed, the fish only come up to 14 inches. Well, then you've
And
got to feed again.
are F1s as funny as that?
Oh,
They'll
yeah,
only come up
100%.
14 and not 12. And
Yeah, it depends how much competition's in your peg. Like when there's lots of competition, like there was towards the end, the fish coming right up to the surface, and you'll see the fish like 20, 30 fish at a time on there. Like it's ridiculous when the shoals come in your peg. But if there's no competition, they don't need to get above that next fish to grab at it. So it's the competition that drives them higher, not so much like if you feed 6 casters, that doesn't necessarily bring the fish higher compared to, say, 60 casters. You've got to feed enough bait to sort of hold and draw the fish in, and then the fish will decide how good it is. Some days on there, you go there, you catch 3-4 foot deep. Maybe that's what I should have done early doors, is add a deep shallow rig, like 4 foot, and I might have picked an odd fish off. But, you know, the plan was always get a good start short, which I missed. And then hopefully they'd be on that shallow line after, like Steve said, I thought they'd be on it after 10 minutes. It probably took an hour to get going.
But when it did, you motored. It were really impressive. We've actually got a clip to 27 to 29. I wrote key decision for Bennett, going shallow again. And this is quite good because you get to actually see him in action a little bit when he was on this big comeback. So an hour and a half, 2 hours into the match.
So with shallow not being great, what I did is I come back on that short line, and that wasn't great either. But what I did spot is as soon as I put some bait in the margins, the ground bait, the fish was instantly onto it. Now, being so clear, I could see the fish and they weren't settling great, but every time I fed it, they were straight onto it. So I thought maybe if I fish it, they'll come back in. So I made the decision to sack that short line because I felt like it could be stopping some fish coming in margins. And I had a quick look in the margin, had a little quick run of fish, and then nothing again. So it's a case now of feeding that margin line, jumping back out on that shallow line. Hopefully there's some fish out there. And now I've sort of made my mind that it's going to be a 2-pronged attack. So margin and shallow, because I just don't feel that short line's going to catch me.
You almost committed to it there, didn't you?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not happening. Shallow is me. That's me goer. That was nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, wasn't that shot?
The big F1s and all. The ones you were catching. A lot of 2 and 3 pounds.
Yeah,
isn't
like
there?
the second time I went back out there, they were massive. Towards the end, they were all sort of 2 and 3 pound.
So I've gone back out into this shallow line now, and all of a sudden you can tell the fish are there. I'm starting to see signs of fish. I can see an odd swirl. You can see the fish rising up, and that's typical of F1s. What you do when you're fishing F1s is you loose feed your bait, and you can't always see it, but on this venue, because it's so clear, you can see the fish actually rise up. So what happens is you're trying to make your rig as natural as possible.
You can see the shapes of them, can't you? When you loose feed, like drone footage, you can see like clouds of F1s. It always amazes me when I was watching it back the other day, how many appear past your pole tip.
Oh, yes.
Like when you were loose feeding, there were so many more beyond your pole tip compared to underneath it. They know you're there, don't they? They can...
This happens at all these commercials. When you're catching like £200, the thing with clay pits, you can see it. You know, I think you'd be amazed sometimes when, you know, if you could see under the water how many fish are in your peg sometimes when you're fishing. I think you'd be amazed. Like, and fish that just sort of swim on there, you see loads of carp just like swim past your top kit line sometimes. And you wouldn't even spot them if it was a coloured commercial. It's a real interesting lake to fish.
Steve, in that middle bit of the match, you had a stint at fishing shallow, and interesting, you did it pretty different, and it was, in my opinion, like a typical Steve Ringer. I'm going to throw my own slant on it. Tell us a bit about your little go fishing shallow, even though you didn't do it for long.
I knew that I'd probably have to fish shallow for a little bit, and I knew that if it was going to be worth doing, I had to probably catch a bit shorter than Andy did. So I did it like a throwing range, and I know having watched it back, Andy said he could have thrown there, but obviously the catty gives a different presentation. But I did it on a throwing range, so I think I fished probably like 7 metres and then fished a slightly longer line, because when I'd been practicing, I'd noticed that obviously you can see them. The beauty of clay pit is it's unlike, say, partridge, tunnel barn. When those F1s are shallow, you can see them. And it was so obvious that your pole tip's there and they're like 2, 3, 4 foot, 5 foot. So I've ended up fishing like a little AR and just flicking it past, which was good because it allowed me to tick over. But obviously you miss more bites because I fished a longer line. So my idea being was fish a longer line.
Between your float and your pole tip you're talking about.
Yeah, and flick to those fish that are sitting back. And it was good. The only thing I noticed was I thought my F1s were smaller. So for me, it was like a tick over line. I was never going to win doing it, but it allowed me to rest the pallet line, rest my edge line, and still put a few fish in the net. And because I'd got that early lead, there was never a time when I thought, and there was a couple of times when I thought, he's catching ridiculous now, but there was never a time when I thought it was gone. You know, when I look back to the year before, there was a little point at Makins where I thought I was in big trouble.
Really?
Yeah. And, but luckily things changed. I think Andy caught the rope with his waggler.
Yeah.
And that changed it, and I got back in it. Whereas I thought a couple of times he might have got slightly ahead, and he definitely got virtually level. But
do you think he did? Do you think Bennett pulled level with you at Weston?
There was one silly spell where it's just like, it helped me, and I think I've said this as well, fishing to the right was massive to me. Not only as in less disturbance that way, but I didn't have to watch him. If I'd have fished inside myself and had to watch him, and someone in I don't care who Andy's obviously like, he's like Iceman, but anyone else, if you're sitting watching someone shipping a great big F1 in every 10 seconds, that's how it seemed. It plays on your mind. And you start to get a bit rattled, you fish faster, you're not fishing as effectively, you start feeding it slightly wrong. So by fishing to the right, I could almost blinker it a little bit and think, as long as you're doing what you need to do, you're all right. You know, when I got that little lead, and I was always conscious of the fact I expected a really big finish.
Right.
So like I kept thinking, if he's only £10 ahead going into the last hour, that's brilliant for me. As it happened, he probably never got that far ahead, I don't think.
No.
But there was an hour where I just thought, Jesus.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because this next little clip that I want to show, I think this is a comment from Dean Toby about Bennett fishing shallow, 33, 34, 44 it is. And like, that's pretty much sums it up. If we can play that, it's sort of Dean crediting Bennett for what he did shallow fishing wise.
Well, we're about halfway through the match, and there's two distinct things I've noticed about both guys at the moment. Neither of them either know or want to let on where they feel like they are within the match in relation to each other. The thing is, it's not like a football game. The scores are not on the doors. We don't know where everybody lies until the weigh-in, which is in a couple of hours' time. The other thing that I've noticed is that both guys seem to be concentrating on their strength. Bagger, a little bit longer, up in the water, and when he's doing that, no one can compete with him. And Steve is definitely concentrating shorter and in the edge. And on that, he's absolutely mustard. Super, super interesting match so far.
What's it like for you two watching that middle bit of the match there where...
I just remember how good it was. It was unbelievable.
Great, wasn't it? Really
Solid.
good. What about you, Steve? What do you think when you watch it
To be
back?
honest, there were just loads more fish to be caught than I imagined. Even like Andy, the F1s, I knew there was a lot, but I never imagined it was going to be that solid. But obviously, to a degree, you are pleasure fishing a little bit because we had so much room and you're pulling fish from all over the place. But like, it was literally at one point, like every time I looked up, I tended to look to my left when I'm playing a fish.
Right.
Because you feel better.
Because you've got one
If
on
I'm
as well.
playing one on, I'll be thinking, well, this is £7, Andy's is £2.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
obviously he's probably caught another 2 before I've hooked the £7. So it was all sort of relative, but I tried not to look. You always feel better looking at someone else playing a fish if you're playing one.
Going into the end of the match, that final part of it, what were you thinking then? You both, Dean sort of summed it up what he says there. Neither of you really knew where you were, or did you? I mean, tell me if you did. But like Bagger, you first, going into that, final 90 minutes, 1 hour of the match. What was your plan for that, and how did you attack that, knowing where you were or judging where you were in relation to Steve at that point?
Well, my plan was like obviously catch as many F1s as I could shallow, and then obviously finish late. Every time I'd been in the edge, I could catch carp in the edge, but they didn't seem that much bigger. I was waiting to catch them, and they were like £3 to £5. I weren't getting any real big fish, so it was back out shallow all the time. Back out shallow, look in the edge. I could see them there. I kept potting it, and they were there all the time. But I still feel like shallow for me was quicker. And I remember saying to Rim with about an hour to go, like, who do you think's winning? Because obviously I felt like I was catching up, but I feel like Steve must have been a lot further ahead of me than I give him credit for. I think he will have been £30-40 ahead. I never felt like that the first 2 hours when we was fishing.
What, you thought you were closer?
Yeah, I didn't realise. He must have got off. Well, I say, no. He must have got off to £30-40 maybe, but I thought it was a little bit closer. But then I remember Rimmer saying, I think Ringer's doing you, he's catching some big fish. And I remember watching him, and I caught 9 F1s as quick as I could get in. And I think Steve had 4 carp, and I thought, he's still £2 ahead of me there, and I can't catch any quicker. And I thought, maybe he is beating me, do you know what I mean? Because I felt like, I can't catch any quicker. I'm going out, I'm getting one every single chuck. They're big F1s. It's not like the £1.5. I was getting some 3-4 pounders mixed in. And some of them, it were like £2, £3, £2. And I'm thinking, that's actually my second ever biggest weight of F1s.
Wow.
So it was, I was catching really well towards the end. I didn't catch loads in the first hour, but I felt like I was absolutely bagging, do you know what I mean? But I can't go much quicker. And I still think he's £2 ahead of me with them 4 fish. I remember watching him and thinking, right, that's 2 to me, 1 to him. That's £6, right? I'm £3 behind. You know what I mean? I'm trying to work it out in my head. Like, am I catching quick enough? Do I need to go in the edge? Like, I'm trying to work out whether I need to drop in the edge and catch 10 carp for £50, or do I stay shallow and catch 20 F1s for £50?
And going into them closing stages, what sort of wrapped your mind up as to how you were going to finish?
Big dog jumping in my peg, really.
I didn't want to come on to that yet, but before we might as well get it in there now then, Toe. So before I ask Steve about the end of his match, right, go on, Bagger, what happened?
No, go on, you can ask Steve if you want, and then we can...
No, go on, let's do it while we're on the dog topic.
Well, my plan was to obviously, like, I knew I was catching really quick shallow, so it was like, do I go down the edge with 40 minutes to go? Do I go down the edge with 20 minutes to go? And they were clouding up for they were clouding up from when I fed it, but they were clouding up last 2 hours like regular. But I could see the fish. They were only like 3 to 5 pounders. They were bigger than the F1s, but I wanted to see a few 6-7 pounders mixed in. And I was planning to go down the edge late, maybe even if it was last 20 minutes, 6 quick carp, because like Steve said, they're hard to settle there. So I knew I couldn't fish it for a full hour because it would have slowed up. So it was timing it right. I'm thinking, do I have the last half an hour there? Do I have the last 20 minutes there? Do I drop in there 10 minutes to go and get 3 5-pounders? And then obviously a big dog come and jumped in, which is...
I bet people listening who's not watched the show are thinking,
what on earth is going on?
What is he on about here?
Honestly, it was the most mental thing that it just come out of nowhere.
Play it, Toe.
Yeah.
Look to the far left-hand side of the screen, folks. Here it comes.
Right near Rimmer with red jumper.
Yeah, red jumper, left-hand side. Here she comes. Jurassic Park, through the trees. Wallop. Look at Steve looking, and then he just turns back. Play it again.
Climbs right out my edge, doesn't it?
Look. Watch Steve's response. Watch Steve. Steve throwing a bit of bait in. Steve's just fishing away. Feeding. Here we are.
Some speed as well, doesn't he?
Steve makes me laugh. Watch Steve.
I think he thought I fell in.
I thought Rimmer had fell in, and I thought it was going to be the greatest moment ever.
Brilliant. I've got to ask you, Steve. You know when that happened and you turned around and you saw what had happened? You're in the midst of concentration there. When you turned around and that happened, what did you think? What did you?
To be honest, it was slightly surreal because I've never seen that happen ever in a match, and like let alone like when you're actually filming. And to this day, I don't really know where that dog came from.
It was sort of random, wasn't it?
It just come running down the bank, and what happened? Rimmer sort of like let it run past him, and then it spooked a duck. And as it spooked the duck, the dog's then turned, gone for the duck. If you look, you can see the duck like just flying off, and the dog's just followed it in, and just like I was like, what is going on here? Like,
that's not what you said during the match.
No, I was fuming at the time, but
did the owner come and apologise
no,
or anything
just
like that?
got a whistle and started whistling it, and then he got out and done one.
Did she even know that it
No,
jumped in?
She wouldn't have had a clue because she never come to the lake.
Oh, so she never come up. So
No.
that dog literally just bolted off.
Yeah.
And come
How long did it take you to train that dog, Steve?
Just cost me 50 quid. He was just starting to get a little bit close, and just one button on my phone, and the next minute there's a dog.
Brilliant. So, in all seriousness, then, Bagger, do you think that affected the end of your match at all? Looking at it, what do you think?
It affected my decision to go in the edge, but it probably cost me. It took me about 10 minutes to get them back, I reckon. 5-10 minutes, probably 15 minutes to get it back solid again. So maximum 15 minutes of wasted time, probably. My edge was never the same, but I don't feel like I would have caught. I had such a good finish shallow. I feel like the carp weren't big enough where I was. I had one about £10 that I dobbed, but all my edge fish, because I was fishing in such shallow water, they weren't like twice the size of me. I was looking at Steve's fish and thinking, that's 2 or 3 F1s. That my fish was like 2 F1s would probably be a little bit more than a carp of my size. I was getting a lot of smaller commons, which I think that's quite common for that peg. It's not.
But it were definitely noticeable because even sat back, I was sort of in between you both with the crew, well back, and like Matt Ford and Joe, they don't fish a lot, but they keep digging me in ribs and they'd be like, that's a big one Steve's had. Steve's definitely catching an odd big one. And even them who were non-anglers as such, they noticed exactly what you're saying there. So for them to point it out, it must have been quite significant. Steve, end of the match for you, I loved watching this bit because you were so hectic and busy, and you sort of brought another line into play very late on, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a deep margin between the two platforms, which was a nice hard bottom. But what I did was, cause I didn't want to waste time, because it was deep, I couldn't see them. So I didn't want to waste time fishing there when they weren't there. So
How deep was it?
3.5 foot.
Right.
So I was feeding both lines by hand. So still ticking over on the pallet. But what I was doing on the inside was throwing it, which is what I'd done in practice. So quite a bit of it got stuck in the grass. And basically that allowed me to know when the fish were there. Because as soon as I see a few come, because the waters are clear, as soon as I saw a few come up into the grass, which is what I learned fishing in that grass, which Andy obviously pulled out. Once I saw them sucking in the grass, I could go in, catch 3 really fast, and then literally you wouldn't get the 4th because they'd spooked, even in 3.5 foot. But it was a great telltale of knowing when to go in, catch 3, literally put it down, straight back onto the platform, a little 5-minute rest, and it world of good, and I could just keep alternating it. And that was always my plan. And in hindsight, it couldn't have gone any better in that last hour. Yeah, Andy was getting F1s like one every 15 seconds, it looked like. Ridiculous. But my fish were like £6 a piece, a lot of them. So he was needing like 2.5, 3 F1s. And by alternating the 2 lines, I couldn't really catch any quicker. And that then made it very difficult for him to catch up. And I almost feel like the end difference was pretty much that first hour. You know what I mean? I managed to sort of maintain rather than extend it just by ticking over with carp. And I didn't need to catch as quick as what obviously Andy did to try and get back into it. Interesting.
Because you said, but this is an important thing for me, Toe, and I've got a clip here where I've put Steve, end of the match, 43 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
We can get that one up. For me, this shows how intense Steve were and busy were. And he said that he thinks the difference was the start of the match, but just watch him fish in this little period here and just see how hectic and busy he still is in the dying stages of the match.
I just want to say, because I've seen this clip as well, you don't do fishing as a good advert for like a relaxing sport or anything like that.
It's the worst. It's brilliant to watch.
This looks like yeah, pretty. It's impressive.
Amazing to watch.
I am obviously very agitated and twitchy.
Yeah,
when I fish.
I did want
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
but very on edge almost.
But that's how I fish. I like to be busy, and I like to be aggressive. And clay pit allowed me to be
Perfect
aggressive.
match.
Yeah, ain't been bad though, has
But
it?
I've been able to fish how I wanted to fish.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I couldn't beat Bennett fishing
Shit,
shallow.
lost my top kit there.
But I knew if
Great
I
clip.
had carp, then I could
Look,
stay in the valley.
feeding,
And that's what
throwing
I
away.
found.
I mean, you did go long. You did go up in the water to rest your inside lines for what, an hour?
Yeah, probably 45 minutes.
He doesn't
But
want Dean talking to
I
him here,
wouldn't
does
say I
he?
matched Bennett.
No, but what's
at least
impressive
I
is
put
he's
some
actually
fish in
having
there.
a,
Yeah.
you know, a
you
good
know, you
conversation as well.
Yeah, it's different, David.
Yeah, no one can live with no.
Bennet's
I've got
just
no
as
chance of
chilled
living
as you
with that sort of
like.
cage-wise.
The thing is, when you said it at the
He looks
start,
a bit
you was like, I
grumpy.
can't live with him when it comes to fishing for F1s up in the water. I was thinking, hold on, I've seen you fish for the last 10 years. Like, there's not much you can't do, but actually, when you compare the two of
I
you,
can do it.
no, exactly.
But I just
there's-
don't go like he does.
There's
If-
different levels of.
If I
of
spent
everything.
like a few months fishing with Andy,
That was a big thing, like the elastic
I'd
choice.
get
I
it
fished with
speed.
black, like
you
that
can't go
red.
fishing
I
for,
never
like,
used
F1s,
it.
like once, 2 days.
I remember
ago,
you
know,
actually
to
saying
do it
afterwards you started using
Probably
red.
the
I
best.
love it now. I
at
want
that type of
Really?
fishing
Yeah.
in the-
Stronger
well,
elastic.
it's
that
not
day
It's
actually
only when you
changed my
see it that you
opinion on it
realise
because
just how
I
quick
mean,
and how
obviously this is a
efficient he
big
is.
fish, but
Oh, he's-
F1s,
he's a
you're
machine,
netting
he's
them
a
so
well-oiled machine,
quick.
and like that comes
that
with,
black's just a bit
obviously
too
being
soft.
brilliant.
For,
and then fishing regular.
Have a look at the size
You
of this
say
one.
that though, mate. I'll tell you what. You said you was going to try and catch them carp on the inside, and that's exactly what you've done.
Yeah.
Big
I
fish,
think
aren't they,
that
them?
has been
Yeah.
the
I reckon
difference
they,
£7,
because
£8.
yeah, they were
every
like
3 or
6.
4 fish you've
I had a
had,
lot of 6-pounders and an odd 8. I didn't actually catch any doubles,
I should
which I thought I would.
Don't know how many fish.
Yeah,
are
yeah.
80% of my fish are carp,
Right.
whereas obviously
I think that's key. 80% of my fish were carp. And what?
So
and
like
what F1s you
what
did
weight
get
you
were
got.
massive
Yeah.
as well.
must
Yeah.
have over 200.
He sounds out of breath
Good
though,
bait
doesn't he,
fishing, mate.
Steve?
Yeah,
If you
well,
listen.
and I've not really had to go more than a top kit and a short four.
Right. What's your
So-
plan for the last hour then?
Just keep alternating. I've had a few now on a top kit, like almost like behind me.
Yeah.
Basically alternate them 2 lines
Right.
and just tick along. I'm going to keep feeding that just in case I need it.
Right.
But if, in an ideal match now, I'll stay there and there.
Right. All right, buddy. Right, I'm going to leave you to it. Good luck.
Cheers.
I like the end bit, me. Dean's like, yeah, good luck, mate. And Steve's like, cheers.
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 Now get off the platform.
Can you go away now?
Go away, I'm catching you in the
But
edge.
that was what was impressive. You were feeding multiple lines, catching big fish, having a conversation, doing the interview with Dean, all while mate. It was just I was out of breath watching it.
It was, you know what? We had to be so. I was scared of sending Dean down to talk to him though, because I know how intense these two were both fishing.
Yeah.
So for me, you had to really pick a moment as to right, Dean, go and have a little chat with him because I really worried about.
Picked a great moment there. Then
That's one of the things I do like, and Andy touched on it at the start. For the 5 hours, we are pretty much left to fish. Each of us probably gets, 3 visits during the 5 hours, so it's done as fairly as possible. It's not like, one's constantly stop-start and the other one's allowed to fish, etc. It's literally like, this is 5 hours, we're going to film it, we're probably going to come to you 3 times each, now get on with it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I thought, in every single match, everyone's been really conscious to try and avoid, obviously, messing someone's swim up or coming in at a bad opportunity, etc. And we've just been left to get on.
That's
Apart
how I
from
wanted
Frankie.
it.
Frankie's the worst one. He's like, right, you're filming and no, you go film Ringo. I'll have Rimmer me. Rimmer does what he says.
Rimmer just stays nice and quiet, doesn't
Yeah, Frankie's like, just hold that up one more time, Steve. I'm like, yeah, you crack on with Ringo over there.
it? Before I talk about this bit, let's play the clip of the very end of the actual match, Tobe, 48 minutes to 49 minutes, and then I want to know, what the boys actually thought right at the very end. So this that
going
you're
at the
gonna,
very end, the all-out clip.
yeah, says the end in big capitals. This is this is the very final stages of the actual match, folks.
Well, that is 5 hours of one of the most intense matches I've seen. And I know I said that twice last year, but generally they've all been like that. So, guys, all out. That is the end of match number 1 to the scorecards.
I feel absolutely shattered. Not only have you got 5 hours of
I'm not
falling,
surprised.
so to speak, but also I've got the mental side of watching Andy pulling F1s in at a speed that I've never seen anything like shallow. So there's a mental tiredness, and then there's the tiredness of like playing carp after carp after carp, concentrating on your float, trying not to sort of be influenced by what other people are doing, etc., etc. So I'm shattered.
What face is that, Andy?
It's a really hot, sticky day. Just had Massive weight.
Both caught fish all day. I ain't got a clue what the weights will be. You know, it's not turned out the match I wanted it to be, but yeah, very draining.
And in all honesty now, like looking back, how did you feel when that all-out whistle went? Did you know the result, Bagger? Did you know what the weights were? Did you know what the outcome were going to be?
No, sometimes F1s can surprise you, and like you think they just weigh. You know, I must have had over 100 fish maybe, so I've got like 100 fish. If they're 4 ounce more, that's another 400 ounce. Like, if you've just slightly underestimated, they can surprise you. Sometimes they weigh not enough. And I was catching some real good uns. So I was always thinking, like, hopefully I've underestimated. But deep down, when I caught my best spell, and Steve caught them 4 carp with about during that last hour it was, when I was working out in my head, he's like, I can't come in the edge, can't catch any quicker. I just felt like he's got me here on stamp.
What about you, Steve? Like that all out whistle goes, did you put your top kit down knowing the result, or?
To be honest, I agree with Andy. If you'd have said to me, right, you've got to say who's won, I thought I'd won. But there was that nagging doubt that I didn't really know how big his F1s were. And like he just said, if they're all £3, I was thinking he could have more than I think. But if you'd have said to me, you've got to make a decision, who do you think's won? I thought I didn't think I'd won by loads, but I'm normally pretty good at keeping an eye on people. I do look around a lot when I'm fishing, and I thought I'd edged it, but there was that little like 15% doubt that Andy's F1s might be a bit bigger than I'd seen him net a couple and thought that's like £3 plus. So there's that nagging doubt. If they're all like that, he might have a bit more than what I think. But there was a little bit of relief as well, because I did feel, obviously under pressure because of the venue, etc. I don't do that style of fishing loads, that whatever happened, it was going to be close. And I think there's that relief that I've done myself justice. I haven't let myself down. I've had a good match. I've done everything I can, and now it's up to the scales.
Well, let's have a look at that clip, Tobe. 52 minutes to 53 minutes. This is the moment that the result was sort of read out and decided.
So, anyway, let's get to the scores because we digress. Guys, phenomenal. Okay. Andy, I don't know what you had in your mind at the start of the day, all right? And I don't know how much energy you've got left after that day.
You both look knackered.
You weighed in.
It was a long
I was going to
day.
say very respectable, but I think it's quite magnificent. 343 pound 4 ounces.
Wow.
Steve, I don't know what you expected at the start of the day either, but you weighed in an amazing 369 pound 4 ounces. So I know it sounds on the scoreboards like it was 20-30 pound difference, but ladies and gents, that was so close.
Ridiculously close.
Ridiculous. 2 massive bags of fish.
Well done, Steve. Well done.
Guys, on to the next one, but I don't know, can it get any better? You just keep pulling it out of the bag. Like, honestly, I'm lost for words.
We won't get weights like this next time, trust me.
Mega, chaps. Well done. It's been an absolute pleasure once again. I look forward to the next match.
Cheers, thank you.
Bagger, what did you think when them weights were read out?
I was surprised they had that much, to be fair. And I thought,
yeah?
I thought, have I done this? Well,
£349.
343, and I'm thinking
343.
343, and I'm thinking, in my heart of hearts, I knew I'd lost, or I felt like I'd lost. I thought, what the hell, has Steve got that much? Like 369 pounds, like colossal weight. Do you know what I mean?
How did you feel, Steve, when he read the weights out? When he read Baggers out first, did you think?
I still thought I didn't ever. If you'd have said to me before we weighed in, what have we both got? I would have been miles out.
Yeah.
I'd have said like, don't know, 250, whatever. But when it was read out, I still thought I'd got more. There was always that, you know what I mean? But it could have easily said, oh, you've had 320.
Yeah.
But when it was called out, I was confident, probably more confident than I'd been in the previous two. You know what I mean? At Makins, I thought I'd edged it, but it was close. And at Partridge, I thought I'd probably lost it at the death. And I got the edge there. So when he called Bennett's weight, it was much bigger than I imagined. But then I thought, I knew that I'd had a lot of fish as well, and I knew my fish were big, so it didn't surprise me when he called me out as the winner.
I've got to ask this one, Bennett, as harsh as it sounds, but do you think you could have won that match?
Yeah, if I'd have done things different, if I'd have, maybe fished in the right spot in my peg, who knows if I'd have thrown casters to my left-hand pallet instead of fishing it, maybe I fished in the wrong spot. If I'd have thrown it in 3 foot and not pulled the grass out, everything we spoke about after the match, everything Steve said made a lot of sense. They wouldn't settle in my edge. So, yeah, of course I could. If I could have got on... I don't know if practicing would have helped me. Because, like I say, I wouldn't have practiced the right methods anyway. I wouldn't have gone and practiced hemp and corn. So I wouldn't have known about that, do you know what I mean? Unless I spotted Steve doing it or something. But, yeah, of course you can win the match. When you're catching that amount of fish... I didn't catch many big fish, but the day before Steve did. Now, whether that was because the nets are in and it's different, but is it because I fished too shallow water and I should have fished in 4 foot off the edge of my pallet? But then, would casters have been the same as hemp and corn? I don't know if it would, do you know what I mean? But, yeah, I could have... The first 3, I feel like I had a chance to win every one.
Right.
But, it's decision-making, innit? And...
What did you think, Steve? What did it feel like for you beating Bennett at Weston? That kind of fishing, you've stressed a lot. You didn't do that much of it. How did you feel after that result were read out?
I felt like it's one of them rare occasions. I didn't fish perfectly because a few things, obviously, you had to adapt. I lost a couple of silly fish, but I felt like I had a plan and that worked perfectly. And I felt like, because there was carp, I had a chance. Like when we first discussed Weston, I was like, F1 race, I've got no chance. But after that practice session, I had a plan. And it's rare a plan goes as well as that one did.
Right.
You know what I mean? Normally, you have a plan and it doesn't quite work out. That one literally couldn't have gone. The only way it could have gone better is if I'd have not even had to pick shallow up. But that was never going to happen in reality. So particularly like the first and last hour, which are probably the 2 most important hours of a match, they went perfectly. Couldn't have asked for any more. I felt my bait combo was perfect, my edge and my pallet. I just learnt so much practicing. And like, if I hadn't have practiced, he'd have still had 340 pound and I'd have been miles adrift because I wouldn't have had a clue what I was doing. And I do think Andy's right. If he'd have practiced, why would he have fished hemp and corn? It was only because that's baits that I'm used to fishing, that I used to fish a lot, that I went there and I had that no preconceived idea. Whereas Andy would have gone there, he'd have spoke to Matty, Christian, and they'd have said, this is how you fish it. And I think it's probably a different venue. When there's only 2 of you, it's different to when there's 15, 20 pegs there. And
in a normal
different
match.
amount of pressure. And I think that helped me as well. Maybe if there'd been 15 people on the lake, I'd have had a slower start because the fish might not have come in. And the weights would have been down, and it then would have suited Andy to catch shallow. But I actually think for me, practice was huge. Couldn't have won without practicing. But had Andy practiced, I just don't think he would have fished the same because that's not how Andy fishes.
It was quite a feet. It was quite a feat beating him there, mate. To be fair, I know what he's like and how he fishes and that. And Matty Dawes come and weighed us in because he was doing a bit of work at the fishery, and even that last hour he kept digging me in ribs, and he was like, he's a beast.
That's what he messaged me afterwards on Facebook.
Like he was like, listen, I know how good Bagger is, and he's keeping up with him, if not beating him. Like he would just, as a total outsider watching you both fish, his emotion and what he said pretty much summed it up to me. I asked you not to tell anyone the result. I'm assuming you both mentioned it to an odd person. I don't know, friends, family. Did you tell anyone what happened at Weston?
I never said a word.
Honestly?
No, I told
Who did you tell? Come on, you got to tell. You can tell me now.
Connor and obviously
Connor Barlow.
Yeah, Connor and that and a few others.
Did you tell him to keep it a secret?
Yeah.
Good. They've done a good job of it.
So yeah, I told a few
And what did
people.
they say?
They just probably expected me to win at Weston. It'd be solid shallow. And I don't think anyone ever expected Steve to catch so many carp. They were all like, what? He's had 370 pound of carp. Like, hemp and corn. It's like, it's a bit alien, isn't it? So, well, it's not an alien method. I actually said to you, didn't I? I remember when it was Natural Baits Festival, hemp and corn on Stretton. I remember winning the match. That's how we used to fish it in the edge.
Robbie Griffiths used to fish it a lot.
They were deep margins. But it's something I had done. Like, it doesn't come into play anywhere now. I think it's more of a like 3 to 5 foot sort of thing. You know, if you're fishing in shallow water now, you tend to go down micro pellets, ground bait, dead maggots, or meat, or whatever's allowed at the place. Like, but it is a bit of an old school method, and it would bang on. And I think a lot of people, I think that's what surprised a lot of people, how he caught them and the amount of carp he caught. Because it is noted as an F1 venue. You don't normally catch the carp on there until sort of the last hour. They might turn up, or the last 2 hours. But you know,
What about you, Steve? Did you tell anyone?
Only told obviously my missus and my dad, basically.
And what did they think?
My dad was like, oh, because my dad always believes in you. He was like, I knew you'd win.
Really?
Yeah, because parents do, don't they?
Yeah.
And obviously, my missus was like, oh, great.
What's the tea?
Yeah. So, no, I didn't, to be honest, I didn't tell him because most of the people I just wouldn't trust
Right.
not to go around telling everyone else.
Interesting. Well, obviously, as we wrap up this podcast, the next show, Ringer versus Bennett, round 2 of this series, we took you to Tamar Reservoir in Cornwall, totally different venue. At this point in the Ringer versus Bennett, it's 3-0 to Ringer. So this was going to be the final one. And that is going to be released on the Tackle Guru TV YouTube very, very soon, folks. So I'm going to close this off. We're not going to say a word about what happened at Tamar. I think we've all done really well not to mention anything about it, by the way, because normally I'll let an odd one slip. So we're going to close it off by saying that the Tamar one is coming very, very soon. Keep your eye out. It'll be all over Tackle Guru social media. And don't forget, if you want to make sure you don't miss it, folks, like the videos and subscribe to the page, and you'll get a little notification every time, so you won't miss a single one of these ones. And we're going to have a podcast after that show all about Tamar and that particular match, a bit of a breakdown. Now, to wrap it up, in true Fishing Gurus podcast style, have you brought me a gift each, folks, relating to this one? Right, I'll start with you, Steve. What gift you got me?
Obviously related to the match.
Yeah.
I bought the float and obviously rig I used. Which
wow.
Was a bit like my approach. Very old school. Obviously, it's a Mick Wilkinson diamond. Obviously, the Guru version. I wanted a really strong float, and that for fishing stability in deep water. And I think the diamond's a forgotten float sometimes. And that was that was a proper diamond venue, as in deep. You need stability. It's a brilliant float for baits like corn. So I bought that one. And it's really strong. I was fishing against the platform. Yes, I didn't get wrapped round the platform, but the float was coming into contact with the structure, etc. And I fished with the same rig the whole match, which says a lot about the float.
Does as well. I might slip that one into my rig box, actually. Maybe you want it, Andy.
Yeah, well, we got a
Can
couple.
you sign it for him, Steve?
Sign it for him.
And Bagger, what about you? I'm going to leave him just there.
This took me about 3 weeks to get.
Did it?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I had to track it down to start with. I found the dog, didn't I? So, I brought you the dog collar. God bless him. No, I brought you a dog collar, yeah.
Oh, thank you, mate.
Found it off that dog. I thought it was quite relevant.
Right, what did you do to the dog, or can that not be said on air?
Can't tell you now. My missus would kill me. No, I'm just kidding. My missus is a big animal lover. She'd kill me if I ever did anything to a dog.
Absolutely. Fantastic. They're great gifts. Boys, I've absolutely loved it. Thank you for tuning in, everyone who has listened. And don't forget, folks, if you've watched this podcast but not seen the film, The Ringer versus Bennett, the first one of this latest series, it's on the Tackle Guru TV YouTube. Boys, gives a bit of a fist pump because we're cool like that, aren't we?
Yeah.
Bosh.
The Fishing Gurus podcast.